Good afternoon. The subcommittee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Pursuant to Committee Rule 2E and House Rule 11, the chair announces that she may postpone roll call votes. Pursuant to notice, the Subcommittee on Environment meets to consider the following measures. H.R. 5519, the Atmospheric Climate Intervention Research Act. H.R. 4656, the Background Ozone Research Act. H.R. 3297, the Harmful Algal Bloom Essential Forecasting Act. So we meet today to mark up 3 bills. Welcome to our first Environment Subcommittee markup of 2020. Today, we will be marking up 3 bipartisan bills. The first bill we will consider this afternoon, the Atmospheric Climate Intervention Research Act, was introduced by our colleague from the full committee, Dr. McNerney. The bill amends the America Competes Act to include atmospheric climate intervention as a research area within the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. I'll speak more about this bill in just a minute during consideration of the bill. The next bill on the roster is the Background Ozone Research Act, introduced by our colleague, Mr. McAdams of Utah. This bill directs the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency to enter into an agreement with the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine to conduct a study on background ozone. Generally, background ozone is considered ground-level ozone present in a given area that is not local or man-made. Ground-level ozone is one of 6 criteria pollutants that the Environmental Protection Agency regulates through its National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS. And unlike stratospheric ozone, ground-level ozone is formed by chemical reactions between volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, and nitrogen oxides, or NOx, in the presence of heat and sunlight. Ground-level ozone is known to cause significant health and environmental impacts. In order to better understand background ozone trends and its contributions to ground-level ozone in the United States, the National Academies of Study in this bill would propose a framework of terms and definitions to standardize research on ground-level ozone, identify research needs to better understand and quantify background ozone and its contribution to ground-level ozone in the United States, and outline a research and development program to support analysis of background ozone trends. This bill is endorsed by the American Thoracic Society and the American Lung Association. Finally, we will consider the Harmful Algal Bloom Forecasting Act, introduced by our colleague from Florida, Mr. Rooney. This bill would authorize NOAA to apply the Anti-Deficiency Act to harmful algal bloom services, and specifically, the bill would require the web services and server processing associated with the harmful algal bloom operational forecast system of the National Centers for Coastal Ocean Science and NOAA to be deemed emergency services critical to the safety of life and property. This will allow these harmful algal bloom services to continue in the event of a lapse in appropriations. I'm glad we're marking up this bipartisan legislation today, and I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support passage of these bills out of our subcommittee. I look forward to moving these bills through the markup process and eventually onto the floor. I now recognize the ranking member to present his opening remarks.
Thank you for holding this markup. Chairwoman Sherrill, today we will be marking up 3 bipartisan bills at the subcommittee level. All 3 have been negotiated at the staff level through open and transparent conversations, so I want to applaud the members and staff on both sides for the efficient example they've set. The first bill, H.R. 5519, the Atmospheric Climate Intervention Research Act, directs NOAA's Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Office to include the results and effects of climate intervention methods in their research. Although it may be far-fetched right now, climate intervention and geoengineering methods like stratospheric aerosol injection have the potential to slow down and even prevent some of the causes of a changing climate. But before these methods are developed and widely deployed, we need to thoroughly understand their efforts on health and the general composition of Earth's atmosphere. This bill gives NOAA the statutory authority to continue the research efforts based on funding that Congress has already provided in this area. Let me add my thanks to Dr. McNerney for introducing this bill. The second bill, H.R. 4656, the Background Ozone Research Act, was introduced by Mr. McAdams and co-sponsored by my fellow committee members, Mr. Rooney and Mr. Olson. This bill directs the EPA to enter into an agreement with the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine to publish a study regarding the research needs related to background ozone. While we do know that background ozone can be produced by natural sources like wildfires and transported by winds, there is much to be desired in terms of knowledge about how much background contributes to ground level ozone and how to incorporate these trends into the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS. This bill is a good first step in improving our understanding of the current and future research needs as it's related to background ozone. The final bill is H.R. 3297, the Harmful Algal Bloom Essential Forecasting Act. This bipartisan bill was introduced by Mr. Rooney and has a number of Science Committee co-sponsors. That should be no surprise given the interest we have had on harmful algal blooms, HABs, and hypoxia this Congress. This legislation is short and straightforward. The forecasting services of HABs and employees at NOAA who are essential to conducting those are expected to continue during a lapse in appropriations. By no means should we encourage a disrupted appropriations process, but as we've seen over the past couple of years, these things do happen. This bill simply ensures that in the unlikely event that appropriations are lapsed again, the HABs forecasting that NOAA publishes will continue without diminishing their accuracy. Again, I want to thank Mr. Rooney for introducing this bill and all of my colleagues for negotiating the necessary changes. I also want to again express my gratitude for the hard work of all those involved to make this a bipartisan and easy markup of common sense legislation. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. We will now consider H.R. 5519, the Atmospheric Climate Intervention Research Act. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 5519, a bill to amend the America Competes Act to
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point. I recognize myself to present some remarks on the bill. Throughout this Congress, we have discussed the significant impacts that our constituents are dealing with on a more regular basis due to climate change. As we have often said on this committee, it is important for us to take into consideration all potential tools available to us and address climate change, including both adaptation and mitigation measures. One such emerging issue that has the potential to play a role in combating climate change is climate intervention. In their 2015 study, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine defined climate intervention as purposeful actions intended to produce a targeted change in some aspect of the climate, which includes activities such as carbon dioxide removal and albedo modification, but not climate mitigation. Climate intervention is a nascent field of science and engineering that is well suited for further research. Given the significant opportunities of this field and the potential global impacts of climate intervention activities, it is crucial that the federal government engage in early research and development efforts. Dr. McNerney's bipartisan Atmospheric Climate Intervention Research Act would amend NOAA's Ocean and Atmospheric Research and Development Program within the America Competes Act to include climate intervention. Additionally, NOAA's Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research is directed to conduct research activities to study potential atmospheric climate interventions and undertake atmospheric observations. This bill, which is endorsed by Silver Lining, takes an important step to addressing the emerging field of climate intervention, an issue that we must consider from all perspectives to ensure an appropriate federal role. Does anyone else wish to be recognized? Are there any amendments? If not, then a reporting quorum being present, I move that the Environment Subcommittee of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee report H.R. 5519 to the full committee with a recommendation that the bill be approved. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes to the bill. Without objection, so ordered. Members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplemental, minority, or additional views on the measure. We will now consider H.R. 4656, the Background Ozone Research Act. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 4656, a bill
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point. I recognize the gentleman from Utah to present his remarks on the bill.
Thank you, Chairwoman Sherrill and Ranking Member Marshall. I'm proud today that this subcommittee is considering my bipartisan legislation to address air quality issues that my home state of Utah and our country is facing. Over the last decade in Utah, we've made great strides toward cleaning up our air. We've seen communities rise to the occasion and reduce emissions through cleaner vehicles, low-emission public transit options, and investing in cleaner energy sources. However, one area that still needs greater improvement in our understanding of background ozone pollution, and that is related to ozone. It's a toxic stew of natural and human-made chemicals. It causes haze over the Wasatch Front valleys, and it's dangerous to health and even results in death. We need to understand why, despite increased health and environmental standards, ozone pollution continues to get worse in metro areas across this country. So by passing this legislation, scientists can help us understand the problem and recommend solutions so that we can improve our air quality and breathe easier in Utah and in places across this country. Background ozone is a combination of nitrogen oxides and volatile compounds reacting with ultraviolet radiation from the sun. The components of background ozone come from many sources, including emissions from vehicles, from power plants, industrial processes, from wildfires, and other human-caused pollutants. According to a report that was authored by the American Lung Association, ozone contributes to 48 deaths per year in Utah and contributed to more than 198,000 poor air quality days in the year 2018 alone. Ozone so deeply affects the quality of life in my state that particles can be found in lungs and even in utero. A large problem that Utah and other areas across the country have faced is that we're not equipped to properly monitor ozone. We lack modeling to help us understand what and where the sources that are contributing the most to ground level ozone sources are. So right now, we can't tell if pollutants are coming from the idling car in front of us or a wildfire that's hundreds of miles away. The Background Ozone Research Act directs the Environmental Protection Agency to work with the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine to produce scientific findings examining background ozone in the United States and to provide recommendations to Congress so we can implement scientific, data-driven policy solutions to address our air quality issues. This bill will study trends in background ozone and how it contributes to ground-level ozone, including identifying non-natural and even international sources. It will also examine current challenges in quantifying sources and contributions to background ozone and ground-level ozone on a regional and national scale. So I want to thank my colleagues across the aisle, Congressman Rooney and Congressman Olson, for their support and their work on this legislation. And I also want to thank the American Lung Association and the American Thoracic Society for their endorsements of this bill. Thank you again, Congresswoman Sherrill, for your support on this important priority for Utah and for America, and I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be recognized? We will now proceed with the amendments in the order of the roster. The first amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Utah. He is recognized to offer an amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 1, amendment to HR.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. I recognize the gentleman for 5 minutes to explain the amendment.
My amendment makes a few changes to the bill based on conversations with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. The amendment would authorize appropriations based on what the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine estimate a study like this will cost, and would change the timeline for submitting their report to Congress. It would strengthen reporting requirements to Congress by directing the national academies to provide policy recommendations to Congress to act on addressing background ozone. So I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If there is no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any other amendments? If not, a reporting quorum being present, I move that the Environment Subcommittee of the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 4656 as amendment to the full committee with the recommendation that the bill be approved. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes to the bill. Without objection, so ordered. Members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplemental, minority, or additional views on the measure. We will now consider H.R. 3297, the Harmful Algal Bloom Essential Forecasting Act. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 3297, a bill.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point. I understand that the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Rooney, had to unexpectedly head back to his district. Does anyone wish to be recognized? We will now proceed with the amendments on the roster. The first amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio on behalf, by the gentleman from Kansas on behalf of Mr. Rooney. He is recognized to offer an amendment.
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 1.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. I recognize the gentleman for 5 minutes to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Chairwoman Sherrill, and I want to also thank Mr. Rooney for introducing this bill. Unfortunately, he was unable to be here this afternoon, so I'll be offering an amendment on his behalf. Harmful algal blooms, more commonly known as HABs, have become a problem in the sea and fresh water across all 50 states. Though human illnesses caused by HABs are rare, their presence can be extremely toxic to marine ecosystems and regional economies. NOAA's National Centers for Coastal Ocean Science, or NCOS, are responsible for short-term and long-term forecasts of harmful algal blooms. Their early warnings give health officials, environmental managers, and water treatment facility operators information to focus their testing when and where it matters the most. Most often, we see beach and shellfish bed closures or increased water treatment in a more appropriate time frame as a result. The forecasts also allow the seafood and tourism industries to minimize impacts. As it stands now, this bill deems the services of the harmful algal bloom operational forecast systems of NCOS as emergency services during a lapse in appropriation. This amendment simply expands the language of the bill to include all forecasting services related to HABs, such as monitoring activities. For example, a cruise to collect data ahead of seasonal forecasts would be deemed essential and proceed during a lapse in appropriations. By including all activities beyond operational forecasts and web services, NOAA can ensure that even under a rare circumstance like a lapse in appropriations, the forecasts of HABs will not suffer in accuracy or quality. This is important for many coastal districts across the nation that depend on marine-based economy. If we can accurately predict the severity of HABs in a particular region, determine where they are, how big they are, and where they're likely headed, vital industries like commercially harvested fish and shellfish businesses can confidently say their products are safe. I hope my colleagues will join me in supporting this amendment and the underlying bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any other amendments? If not, a reporting quorum being present, I move that the Environment Subcommittee of the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 3297 as amended to the full committee with the recommendation that the bill be approved. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes to the bill. Without objection, so ordered. Members will have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplemental, minority, or additional views on the measure. I want to thank members for their attendance. This concludes our subcommittee markup.